statistical, so unpredictable, here on SNL Stats.
Yes, that is right. SNL is back. It is 2021, and we have on SNL Stats our first roundtable of the year. First off, I would like to thank Will from America, who put together our new theme song, and it really hyped me up for the incredible panel we have tonight. Let's get right to it. Joining us for the first time in 2021, it is Rich Tackenberg. Rich, how you doing?
Hello, I am great. I am Saturday Night Live's back. How could I not be in a good mood?
Yeah, definitely. It was 5 weeks of anticipation, and we're back, and I'm so excited to talk about it. Here with us is superfan Sammy Kay. Sammy, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me again, and I'm excited to talk about a fun episode of SNL tonight.
Definitely happy to have you. And joining us for the first time on one of our regular roundtables, you may have heard him. We did an interview with him. He is a collector of all things SNL. He has SNL memorabilia. He is the official archivist of what I like to say for all things SNL. James Stevens, how you doing?
Always a pleasure, John. Glad it worked out that I could be here. And I hope you know what that's referencing.
Well, I'm happy to have you, James. For those of us who haven't heard the interview that I did with you, talking a little bit about your origin story, would you mind just giving the audience a little bit of a recap of your history with the show?
Yeah, for sure. For me, I have vague memories, fond memories of watching the old reruns, like on Nick at Night. They were like 30-minute captures, which is kind of crazy to believe. But for me, I think it started around 1989 with the 15th anniversary special. I remember that coming on a Sunday, and taped it and watched it many times. And everybody in school was talking about it the next day. And from that point on, I was hooked.
Yeah. If they're very familiar feeling for us and all the listeners. So this is what I would like to do to start off the show. Like I said, first show of 2021. I want to kind of set the table. So this is the point of the podcast where we're all kind of getting our drinks and we're about to start the conversation. And I want to talk about, the themes of what we're looking for and our expectations going into the second half of the season. So when we last spoke to you on one of our regular roundtables, it was the Christmas show, and we had this, major event where we see Alex Moffat as Biden. So, that was a big topic of conversation. And were we going to see Alex Moffat as Biden going into 2021? That didn't happen yet in the first episode, but I'm sure we're going to see him during the next run. We also have this, conversation about 20 cast members. We haven't had an episode yet until this week where all 20 cast members were in the show. That was really interesting. And then we also have COVID protocols, as the world is, kind of moving forward into 2021 and a potential vaccine on the horizon. Will SNL, relax some of their protocols, and how will that affect the overall quality of the show? So these are all topics that I kind of want to get to before we get into the Krasinski episode. So Rich, let me bring you in. Is there anything that you want to talk about with regards to your expectations for the second half of the season?
It's funny. I was writing down some thoughts ahead of time, and I really covered those exact same three. I would say the bigger thing when we talked about Biden is sort of thinking about the Obama era. We're moving in this very fast manner from an avalanche of current events that feel like they have to be covered and major characters that are larger than life to a period where there are very few larger than life caricatures and topics that have to be discussed as far as that, actual press conferences or specific events that SNL needs to do their take on. How do they make that transition? I see that as a good thing. My experience has always been this is what SNL does best, not how do we do our take on that debate, on that news conference, on that specific moment on live TV, rather the what's SNL's considered take on it. And I think, we'll talk about the cold open. I think they're really starting to set the stage for this is how we're going to go into this. So I think that's, for me, I could comment on all three, but I want to hear from everyone else. I really think that's what I'm most interested in. And really what's also coming out of this is SNL going to share a point of view, or are they just going to do low-hanging fruit impressions? And I think we started to get some answers from that, contradictory answers on that in this episode that we'll talk about.
Yeah, definitely. And Sammy, let me go to you. So, our super fan on the panel tonight. What were your expectations coming into this run of 5 episodes we have going into the year, and the things that I talk about with regards to setting the table? How did you feel about all those things coming into the new year?
Sure. Yeah. Well, personally, for me, the energy in the show tonight, it felt like, a giant weight has kind of been lifted off the shoulders of both the cast and even the writers, to where this is a new era of the show, this post-Trump era, where they are able to kind of go back to, just kind of having political conversations and takes on things. But it's not necessarily the focus. We're not ripping things from the headlines and stuff like that. So as far as looking ahead to the rest of the season, yeah, I'm expecting a show similar to this, where the energy is fun, and I feel like there's a little less pressure on everybody's shoulders to kind of have to put a spotlight on everything going on in the world the way that they did in the Trump era.
Definitely. And James, I know that you know, when you're watching the show, we've had discussions off the air about, your interest in the cast and the crew, especially with regards to how they go about, the week and planning SNL, and the COVID protocols. Like I mentioned, all these things are definitely affecting how they go about their business. So what have you thought, and what are your expectations going into the second half of the year?
Yeah, I don't know that I have expectations as much as the things that you mentioned, and Rich in particular, about the point of view. I like how Rich said that is, kind of addressing events without addressing the event. Of course, we'll talk about the cold open, and I enjoyed that it wasn't the obvious, copy and paste from the inauguration or something like that. But it didn't. You'll laugh maybe, but it didn't really occur to me that we didn't see Biden. I mean, I know that we didn't see Biden, but I was more impressed on how they talked about the different things throughout the episode, and so that was for me refreshing. The other thing, John, that you mentioned about the whole 20-member cast being there in the building, in the studio, and each of them showing up at least once, most of them multiple times, I think was amazing to just kind of see everybody coming together in that realm. But then even the COVID protocols, I mean, you hear everybody talking about, the audience is about 1/4 the size as what it normally is, which is a small audience, already. So I, for me, one of the things I felt like early on in the show, it felt like they were a little dead. Like things that normally you would hear a laugh, was to me seemed pretty silent. And so I think the cast and everybody's trying to, make their way around that. And we've seen on the social media things, the read through on Wednesday nights, being in the studio and all spaced out and all that kind of stuff, but just hearing more and more about how the control room is spaced out, and they have their camera meeting at 11 p.m. or whatever, and the other folks are clearing out of that. And I just learned, I think I shared this with you, John, also off the air, that I didn't even know that our good friend, the director, Don Roy King, had COVID for a time and was actually out one episode. So Michael Mancini jumped in for him. So just to hear sort of these workings behind the scenes, and how, for the most part, for me, it seems that no one's really missed a beat. It seems to still be the same SNL. And even though I'm maybe ahead of myself here, I enjoyed the episode that we're talking about here with John Krasinski.
To James's point, I think what's also interesting about the second half of the season is the protocols are still in place, but I think that the audiences giving them a pass for COVID is no longer in place, because they did it. They came out of the gate and they were able to produce quality, funny, humorous television despite all these. Now that's just expected. So now we're going to come into the site where you just have to do it despite all of these, all of these things that are making it hard. So I'll be interested to see. I wonder if that wears on them, because it feels like it's an exhausting process.
Yeah, I agree with you, Rich, and that was, really, like I said, one of the things that I was keeping an eye on. I know that our friends over at the Standby Line podcast, they mentioned that there's going to be no standby line at least through February, and then probably for the rest of the season. So our assumption is that as these things progress, it's hopefully by the fall we're going to get a full audience back in for 47. But so I'm not expecting insane amount of applause. But James, I couldn't agree more with you, where I was watching this cold open, and we'll get into the content of the cold open and if we liked it or not, but the energy in the room to me felt mild. It wasn't the energy that I expect, where this is a party, like Rich always says, like we're always excited to kind of get into the episode. And I felt that took away a little bit from the writing of the cold open. Rich, did you feel similarly?
Oh, I definitely did. I think it's a combination of a couple things when we get into the cold open. A, you're right. When you have a quarter of the audience, the big obvious laugh, it's O.J. Simpson, you're going to get that whole room. But there's but when a joke is meant for 10%, 10% of 25% is a much lower number. And you don't get that knowing laugh of the cool kids. You instead feel like it didn't land at all. And I think that hurt. I think there were a couple of mistakes structurally that they made at the very beginning of this sketch, which hurt them. It took the audience to take at least a full beat before they went, okay, now I understand what's going on, and now I am on board and I am laughing. But we sort of suffered as the audience was sort of figuring that out with them. So I think it was both.
Yeah. And Sammy, I mean, I know you definitely keep up with pop culture and current events and all of that. How did you feel about this cold open and the way that we started the show?
I really enjoyed it. I mean, a couple of people on the panel tonight have already said how, they are, ready to get into this new era of the show where we're not just repeating the lines that kind of been ripped in the headlines. And being the first show back from such a long break, which kind of felt like a longer break than we typically get from the Christmas episode to when they come back. It was just such a fun recap because they could have taken any single element of the past month or so and just focus the entire cold open on that. And instead, it was kind of a, punch after punch of everything that's been going on. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. And I'm looking forward to, going forward, the cold open's not necessarily being, here's Biden talking at the podium. It's kind of having a new spin on it. Like a talk show is a cold open. Like when was the last time we had that? So.
It's very true. We haven't had I wouldn't say that this is specifically not political, because it was basically a rundown of current events, but we haven't had a non-political cold open in the longest time that I can remember. And I know throughout the Obama administration, partially because SNL didn't necessarily have the best take on Obama, but also, many weeks throughout that season, you would have or those seasons, you would have regular sketches in the cold open spots. And then as soon as obviously we got to the Trump era, it turned into a whole other thing. So James, let me get your thoughts on the cold open, and then I want to get back to Rich and hear about the couple things that he, saw in the cold open that may have taken away from it.
Yeah, the cold open when it first literally opened, I was kind of like, okay, so is Kate playing herself or not? And then of course we get that reveal there at the end, which actually is one amusing thing, I think, is just that sort of meta nature of the show, but then also like it reminds me of like Kate kind of has this. Kate is now like a character of like herself losing her mind a little bit, like how she's been called out on Weekend Update now, and this was another example of that. One of the laugh out loud moments for me also, I don't know why, but just when I see Alex coming out as Mark Zuckerberg, I just laughed, and as Rich said about OJ, it's just an immediate laugh moment too, and his anger. He says something like he's almost going to kill somebody, or so he doesn't say kill, but I think that no matter how many times you poke fun at OJ, maybe Don Allmeyer would disagree with me on this point, but I enjoy it.
Yeah, definitely. Rich, tell me, you said you had a couple things from the cold open that you felt like took away from it. So tell me what you think.
Well, I mean, and by the way, I really like this cold open a lot. I thought it was great. It was a great point of view, and the thing that worked for it but worked against it at the beginning is that other than the Mark Zuckerberg impression, these were not lampooning people. These were basically, this is what this congressperson has said. This is what happened on Reddit and in the stock market. This is OJ got the vaccine. We don't have to put a hat on a hat, as they say in comedy. OJ got the vaccine. So I love that it was sort of this take of like, instead of writing a lot of jokes and doing a lot of silly impressions, we're just going to crystallize everything that's happened since we broke for Christmas break, which was wonderful. Now, doing that, I think, did take the audience a minute to get it. When Cecily Strong comes out as Marjorie Taylor Greene, I know of her. I kind of know a bit about her. I don't know her. So this is not like doing Sarah Palin, where Tina Fey can say, I can see Russia from my house, and everybody's on board from the jump. It took a minute, as James said, we come into this, we don't know who, we don't know what character Kate is playing. In fact, she's playing herself. I'm not sure why they didn't just say that from the beginning so we could be on the train with her. And, Cecily, I think, is tremendous. When she comes out, she's offering a gun, which kind of, there's this moment of like, people are laughing, but it's not like, it took everyone a second to sort of settle in. And then I think once everyone understood, we're not painting this character as, the character that she's going to do on Weekend Update. We're just going to really use lines. Then I think everyone really got up to speed, but it really required kind of understanding what happened in pop culture and in current events around the stock market and in the government and in social media to really get these jokes, where Alex Moffat really stood out, where he was doing a caricature of Mark Zuckerberg, which he's done before, which was not of the piece of what happened in the last 5 weeks around social media. So in general, I really like the sketch a lot. I thought doing that and saying, and this is Kate McKinnon, the last thing I'll say about the energy is how rare is it that when it's time to yell live from New York, we don't have everybody running back onto the stage to scream it. It was just Cecily by herself, which was fun, but it didn't give us the energy we often get coming out of a cold open.
So can I just chime in real quick, John, if you don't mind? Because Rich first is one of is just one of your exceptional panelists, because he's and I'm not just saying that, Rich. I love the way your mind works, and I love how you
keep talking, please.
No, I love the way you break things down, because you're exactly right, and the point about a hat, you don't need to put a hat on a hat. I'm probably in many respects a little, too nice and just like, I'll tell you what I like and what I didn't like, but I'm not so much the reviewer as much as your critical eye is what kind of makes this fun to have a roundtable and have folks talk about that. I will say about the live from New York line at the end, and I know, John, where you're going to go next here with this is, there's something about the number of episodes for a long time now, probably even going back a season or two, where I started to kind of get annoyed where everybody who's on stage just comes together and screams it, where it used to be a conversation and one person will say it and the camera zooms in. So there was something about Kate really having fun with the delivery of that that got me kind of excited, and I enjoyed that this past episode.
Chevy Chase style of Live from New York. You're right. You're totally right.
Well, what I was going to say before we move on from the cold open, and I don't know if we are yet, this is again to say, Rich brings this one thing and I'm quirky and do a different thing. I don't know if anyone else finds this interesting, but I'm going to share this. So the cold open that now that they posted online, if you go and you watch it on the YouTube channel or the one that's on Peacock or whatever, has been, they kind of tweak it and re-edit it a little bit. What's interesting is from Cecily's entrance to Cecily's exit is all from dress rehearsal. And the music bed, when she comes in, is different than when they had the live version. But and you can hear, if you play it side by side, there's different tone nuances in the delivery, but all the words, the script is exactly the same with the exception of one thing. When Cecily asks how much time you got, Kate in the live version didn't say anything, but in the dress rehearsal now that's posted out there, she says, "For you, very little."
Interesting.
That's funny.
Yeah, I'm curious to know where you thought I was going to go with this, because this is the thing. I wanted to talk about something with the cold open that's a little bit, take a little bit of a turn on this, is that the choice to go with Kate as playing herself, I like from a historical perspective. I've always loved in cold opens, or even throughout the show, when cast members play themselves. I find it gives you a little bit more information about their personalities, who they are. We get to learn the meta of the show. Those moments are the moments that get clipped and passed around throughout the years and makes you feel as a viewer that you are friends with these really cool people who are on Saturday Night Live. Saying all of that, I think that Kate is an incredible performer, and I love what she's done in the show. But we've had 3 instances this season, twice her playing this Doctor We Notice character, and once now in the cold open, where I am given the impression that Kate is simply fed up. And I don't know that that is the best thing for an SNL cast member to portray on the screen. Now, I just want to be clear to the audience. I'm okay if Kate's not okay. Like if there's issues going on and she's upset, with the world, or she has things, as a person, I want her to be okay. But as an SNL cast member on screen, opening up the show and being the one who says live from New York, I just don't know if I fell in love with the premise of I'm not okay with the world. And I don't know if it's just my impression or if other people feel similarly. But let me ask you, Sammy, as someone who loves the show, did you feel the same way?
No, I actually I'll push back on that and say that I do like, especially in this specific circumstance, that there are a lot of things right now in the world. We are starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel a little bit, but we still are in the thick of it. So for me, as someone who looks up to these SNL cast members like they're, superheroes, seeing someone else struggling with these kind of issues that I'm struggling with, puts it all in perspective and makes me feel like I'm not alone. We're getting really deep here, but it makes me feel like we're kind of all in this together. So that's interesting that you have that take on that, because for me, I appreciate her kind of wearing her heart on her sleeve, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, look, if the show wants to write it, clearly this cold open was written from a tone that was like, this is supposed to be from Kate's perspective. This is Kate's talk show, and she's playing herself. So it's obviously, it's whether you want to attribute it completely to the way she thinks or not, you have to do it at least a little bit in your analysis of this cold open. But Rich, let me ask you, I want to get your perspective on what I'm saying. Obviously, I don't disagree with you, Sammy, but it made me, think for a second, are we going to get this Kate for the rest of the season and possibly for the end of her SNL career? So, Rich, let me hear what you thought.
It's a great question. I mean, I think my answer is a little bit 30 degrees off of the question that you asked specifically, which is, one of the things I said, I think when the show started, and again, I love the sketch, but it also started a little bit off for me is, watching Kate Mckinnon for over 8 or 9 years on the show, I have been conditioned to expect her to take the character to 10. Whatever she is going to play, she is going to be bounding out of the seat, a ball of energy, taking it to 11. So in the beginning of the sketch, it was so strange to be like, they cast Kate as the straight person in the sketch of Crazy People. That's so odd to me. And I don't think I really sort of connected, this is supposed to be, I I understood in my head this is supposed to be the voice of the show, but it wasn't until she said something about, you've confirmed, it makes me remind, was something about being a lesbian, which was, I can't remember what the joke was, but it was a great joke, but it was a very Kate joke. I feel like if you were going to do this, it would have been so helpful to set up from the beginning, this is Kate McKinnon and I'm the host of, because at least then, as I said, we're on the train with them together. As far as that goes, I don't mind it so much right now as far as like Kate, like I've lost my mind, the world is crazy, because I do think A, it's in the voice of the show, and B, that character that she was playing did not necessarily take away from any of the comedy. I didn't feel like it was a downer on the comedy. I felt like it was just like, I've so had it with everything. I want to shine a light on the things that I think are crazy. And I think that does work well for the show.
Yeah, for sure. James, let me bring you in on that. I want to hear your opinion about this Kate conversation. It's just for me, like I was saying, like I try and think about the meta of things, and I think about Kate coming into her SNL career in, I believe, 2012, and with the Sofia Vergara and all of the crazy characters and all this stuff over the last few years. And it's just a little bit of a different Kate that we're seeing now, and the development of her like through the Hillary impression until now. So, James, let me get your opinion.
Yeah, no, I really respect your thoughts on it, and the way you first sort of articulated it made me think that there's maybe, your background, in events, maybe there's a little bit of a PR kind of thing that just resonated to you because of what you do is in terms of your day job. I never thought of it like that, but your feelings are your feelings, so you're not wrong. What it did make me think is, to your point, is, who was she supposed to be if not herself, or who was supposed to be the straight person, to play off those folks? I don't know. Rich, you mentioned the Chevy Chase part of it and her delivery of the Live from New York line. It kind of reminds me of that same thing where the show was using his name, at the beginning, or that was the, kind of the full, spotlit star, which is kind of who maybe she is. I think that the We Notice thing, for me, as I reflect back on it, especially with your question, John, on Weekend Update, the first time they did it, I think that it was typical Saturday Night Live. We don't have an ending. Let's say, Kate, how are you doing? Or whatever was going to be, you know what I mean? Like sometimes they just have a really hard time getting out of the piece. So it could have just been one of those things. But her cracking up or losing her mind or being weirded out by the world, to me seems very much like the meta-ness that we see of like the Kyle and Leslie, over the years, where this is who she is now. I don't know that she's any more gone or that we need to worry about her, but I don't really know.
John, you bring up one other thing I wanted to say, because you brought up some good points, and James is saying something too. When I think about meta, people who've been on the show a long time, so I'm going to compare for a second Kate to Keenan. Keenan obviously much longer. Keenan had this arc where he's now at the point in the show where he's graded all these different characters, but he's always Keenan, and we know who Keenan is. Hence, he gets a sitcom on NBC. Kate had this arc where, especially around the Ellen and the Hillary, she hit this absolute apex, and now she's on the other side of that. She's still clearly one of the biggest players on the show, but I don't feel like I have a sense of Kate. Whether she, now she's playing Rudy Giuliani, but then also, in all these different sketches, I don't know her. So I actually think that this may not be a bad piece of branding for her. Of they always say, on the show, the only people whose name are the anchors of Weekend Update. And I think by Kate sort of breaking out of that and being the voice of the show of I'm so fed up, I can't take it anymore, might be good branding for her, because it's not going to land on an iconic character. It's not going to land on an iconic kind of sketch or what up with that or something. So this could be interesting for her sort of as she leaves the show, that we remember her as maybe the voice of the show in season 46.
It's an excellent point, and I'm totally with you. I just, when I look at SNL cast members playing themselves on the show, I take that as more memorable, probably twice as more memorable as any character they're going to play. So I do believe that whenever a cast member makes a conscious decision to play themselves on the show, they have to be prepared for the audience to get an impression of, their voice and what they want to be remembered for. So not that I'm saying that it's a bad thing for what Kate was doing, and that if she is struggling, I do want her to be okay and I do want her to get help. So I love Kate, but I'm just saying I want to point out that this is something that I'm noticing in season 46 that I didn't notice in season 38, let's say. But let's move on. Let's kind of talk a little bit more about the episode. And we have John Krasinski as our first host of 2021. Most famous for playing Jim on The Office. And we do have a history of former hosts who have been in The Office and have appeared in cameos. So Sammy, I know you're a big Office fan. So what were your expectations for Krasinski going in?
Well, this time last year, or going back to March of last year, I was so excited when they announced that Krasinski was going to host for A Quiet Place 2, a movie which got delayed and is still not coming out, and who knows when it's going to come out at this point. But I was a huge fan of The Office. He's been on my list for years of someone who I'd love to see host SNL. I used to watch the NBC comedy night done right. Whole lineup of Community and The Office and Parks and 30 Rock. And there'd be all these people like, Nick Offerman and, Joel McHale from Community who never hosted. And I'm like, NBC, you got great talent right there. Go get them to host. So, it was great to see John Krasinski finally get a shot. It is also just great to see him do comedy again. I was on his Wikipedia page earlier today. And, since The Office ended in 2013, he hasn't done like any comedy, like movie, TV, nothing. So it was kind of cool to see him be funny again. And I think he did a good job as like a first-time host.
Yeah. James, what about you? Were you a big Office guy?
Oh gosh, yes, for sure. And I, just like Sammy, was hoping that we were going to see him in the host role this season because of the announcement at season 45. So I thought he did a good job. The monologue. When you talk about a host, sometimes your brain just goes instantly to the monologue. It was kind of not. It was fine. You know what I mean? Like it just we got in, we got out. It had the folks asking questions there in the back, and it was amusing. And some people are really excited about the Pete Davidson kiss, and others are not as much. What's interesting, though, I guess. John's first time hosting, you mentioned this, John, kind of off air here, that we've got a season of several first time hosts, and it's kind of hard to do that thing where what season has the most first time hosts, because if you go back to the beginning, they all were, but in recent times, there's just quite a lineup of some good folks. I don't know what I'm saying other than I think John did a good job, and it's always fun to see folks around my age get so excited to be hosting because they've grown up watching the show. That's always just a big kick to hear them talk about it that way.
Yeah, and to answer your question, I believe, I don't have it exactly offhand, but I believe season 7 of the show, which was one of the Ebersol years, the first Ebersol year, is the one with the most first-time hosts left on the show, in the history of the show. Rich, are you an Office fan, and were you excited to see him?
I'm a huge Office fan. Huge Office fan. Yeah, excited to see him. Pleasantly surprised, as we said. Hasn't done comedy in a long time. Has no experience with live comedy, which is a very different beast. He didn't even come from a multi-camera sitcom. He came from a single-camera comedy that had no audience. And we, of course, not knowing John personally, although I have run into him and Emily Blunt in Starbucks, and I did not say hello, but they seemed very lovely, and they were very nice to the baristas. Was he going to be okay was he going to be interested in making fun of his time on The Office, which is now a long time ago? Or were we going to see Jack Ryan sketches and Quiet Place 2 sketches? I didn't know whether he'd be game or not. So very pleasantly surprised. Great live skills, great, rolling with, with the live audience, very game to make fun of The Office, which everybody knows him from. So, not every sketch was a home run, but I thought he was a welcome addition to the group.
You didn't yell "Kiss Pam" to him?
Well, I will say, that sketch doesn't work outside of COVID, because if it's outside of COVID, we're all expecting a Jenna Fisher cameo. You don't set that up without a Jenna Fisher cameo. And, but in COVID, we know Jenna Fisher's not there. Is Pete Davidson a good substitute for Jenna Fisher? I will say no, but at least the sketch delivered on the premise, because we knew there wasn't going to be a cameo there.
See, this would have been a great opportunity, and I don't know. I mean, I guess SNL has done this in the past, where they've had, for example, like President H.W. Bush come in. But this would have been a good opportunity to have Jenna Fisher zoom into the show, do a side-by-side kiss with Jim and Pam from Zoom to home base. That would have been an interesting opportunity if they started doing something like that. I know that they once had Chevy Chase host from not actually being in New York City. So the show does have a history of stuff like that, but not for a long time. Let's talk about the episode a little bit more. The way I like to do things is we're not going to go exactly sketch by sketch. We're going to talk about the things that we want to talk about. So, Sammy, let me start with you. Was there a particular sketch that stood out to you that you want to get into?
The twin sketch, the dividend sketch, I thought was great. It was classic kind of Mikey Day, Streeter Seidel, just like bizarre out there humor. When it first started, I was like, okay, cool. We're getting into another kind of GameStop stock sketch thing. And, they did the swerve there, and I really like that. Stuff that didn't work for me as much. I would say the theme song sketch. Going into that one, I was like, oh boy, we're going to get, just celebrity impressions, which for me, when they do sketches where it's just like impression after impression, that works for me if the impressions are good. And yeah, that one didn't connect as much with me, just because besides like Cecily Strong as Julie Andrews and Chloe Fineman as Kim Cattrall, the rest didn't really feel like impressions to me. They were kind of just like, we're dressing up Beck Bennett as Hopper from Stranger Things, and there's no impression, there's no take or anything there. But I did laugh at the Baby Yoda, Kyle Mooney as Baby Yoda, which is slowly becoming his one of his more frequent recurring characters, and Pete as cousin Greg, because I just binged Succession, was also made me laugh. But yeah.
So let's put a pin in those two, and let's talk about those. So Rich, James, do either of you have strong feelings about the twin sketch?
I was just going to say, I think Sammy and I are the same person, perhaps, because I feel very much the same. I like the twins. They're odd. The Zoom working from home meetings is so relatable right now. And, kids in the background is something I can relate to. So though my kids are not, that's not creepy and stuff like that, or some might say they are, I don't know, but it's, and then the prop puppet thing, side note, again, this is the kind of weird backstage stuff that I just find interesting. So there's the outside of Pittsburgh is a team called Monkey Boys Productions that have done a lot of the props and puppets for SNLs over the years, like the extreme baking cakes, or even like the White House podium, Melissa McCarthy as Sean Spicer did. So they put the little, crazy baby doll thing together. So those kinds of things I just find interesting when somebody writes something on a piece of paper and they're like, all right, we can build that, because you always just have to think somebody's done that, somebody put that together. So I enjoyed that for what it was. And then I am with you, Sammy, on the opening credits song. I have in the past really just been fond of those celebrity impressions in musical settings, the the Christmas one several years ago that they did. And one of my all-time favorites, I don't know why, is a cold open, the Rockers to Explain Whitewater, that just recently David Mandel, writer at the time and was the Veep showrunner. I just connected with him recently and found out that he actually was one of the people who wrote that sketch. So yeah, it wasn't, as Sammy said, I didn't think the impressions were all that great, and it just wasn't very many. Some of those times I just want to watch it over and over again because it's so catchy. I think the payoff there, if there was one, was Krasinski singing the lost lyrics to The Office was maybe the best part there. But yeah.
All right, Rich. What about you with either of those two sketches?
Yeah, I agree with, the twin sketch again. As Sammy said, I like that we thought it was going to be another topical current event that we've already covered in the cold open with the Reddit, stock market, GameStop, and then this wonderful twist. Super fun. And I also, what I really liked that I think made the sketch work so well is that nobody went over the top on it. I think that, both Kate and Mikey actually played it really nicely. And then Cecily and Beck as sort of this, the straight men in this, with Krasinski playing the dad. Everyone played it really nice and sort of at a level 6. So the oddity was the thing that we were laughing at, not sort of some real over the top performance. So I thought that was really fun. And obviously the sketch was going to end with the twins in the studio. We were waiting for it. We got it. It was the absolute expected button that sort of brought it home, which was nice. Opening songs, I agree with you guys. I mean, a lot of times I wasn't sure if we were making fun of the celebrity through the impression or making fun of the show. So I wasn't quite sure where I was supposed to laugh. I think even though Pete Davidson's impression was horrible, it was still the funniest because I was like locked into, okay, I see what you're doing here. I understand what's sort of fun about that. But certainly this will be remembered as John Krasinski Sings The Office. I mean, that was just great. And the fact that he really sold it, he didn't pull any punches on it, was really fun. So for that I enjoyed it, but it wouldn't make any best of list for me.
For sure. I think for me, the twin sketch, I kept trying to think of like what this reminded me of. And there was in an Amy Schumer hosted Mother's Day sketch where they did a game show from a few years ago. Mikey and Kate played very similar characters, but they were a mother and son. So there was that. And there was also a Michael Phelps hosted episode right after the 2008 Olympics where you had Will Forte, Amy Poehler, and Michael Phelps play a family, the Jasper family in a sketch, which is very, very similar. But these types of things always get me, and I always find them hilarious. And you are very right, James. The props department killed it with that. And then with regards to this opening credit songs, I think for me, this is the one thing, and we're going to talk about the cast a little bit as we go forward. But this is the thing for me that if you're going to do these types of sketches, you're Jimmy Fallon, Michael Bublé Christmas songs, or you're Now That's What I Call Music, like all these things. This is the time where if you have 20 cast members, use your full cast. That's what I like, don't bombard a sketch that doesn't need all the cast members and you throw them in there. This is the time where we want to see the talent that you have hired for SNL and go tell every cast member, bring me your best impression of somebody from a TV show. And that's what I want to see, and use those opportunities for things like this. And I do feel that despite some of the impressions being better than others, we missed out on several cast members from potentially coming into this sketch and doing some interesting impressions. So those are my takes on those two. Rich, let me go back to you. Let's talk about any other sketches that you want to talk about.
I mean, a couple others. The one that I want to really admit that I'm embarrassed that I quite enjoyed, and for no good reason, I really love the Subway sketch. I just love, and by the way, if you hated it, you're right. You're right. It was not a good sketch, but those two characters, I just love. I thought that, and for a live sketch, the timing was beautiful. I just loved seeing Krasinski and Beck playing those two characters. That I just thought was so fun. I really liked that sketch, and the idea that all these two guys are really famous for was getting Jared. They didn't even write the $5 footlong, and they wanted to bring Jared back. Keenan was just doing exactly what you want Keenan to do as the straight man in the sketch, and their song for the $5 footlong was so fun. There was no ending to this sketch, and even the idea of just the bowl of bologna, which as a protein bowl, that didn't even make sense. So I thought that was really fun.
I actually thought that protein bowl was a good idea. Like, I thought that was the best part of that. But actually, for some synergy, Jared Fogle, the Jared from Subway, appeared on SNL during that Michael Phelps episode that we spoke about. So I thought that was an interesting tie-in. Sammy, do you want to jump in on anything with the Subway sketch?
Yeah, it's funny that you're saying it's a bad sketch, because I also really enjoyed it. I loved seeing Krasinski play a kind of more of an outlandish character, because a lot of the sketches he was kind of doing more of the straight man Jim from The Office sort of thing. So I really like the chemistry the two of them had together, and also I think we're gonna talk about this a little later, but Dismukes in this sketch kind of killed it as well. I wrote down a line here. There's something to where Beck Bennett or Krasinski calls him a kid, and the delivery he has is, he says, "Well, I'm not a kid, I'm a man," or something like that. That delivery, for whatever reason, just killed me. So, this episode was a good spotlight for him. The loser sketch, I'm sure we'll talk about as well, which I really, really dug. But I really enjoyed the Subway sketch. Yeah,
James, what about you?
I love that you both loved the Subway sketch. It was, it was okay for me. I think the Subway jingle was for sure the best part. Jared, it's interesting, and John, feel free to edit this out if need be. But when it was going through the crazy times, and he was in the news, he lives outside Indianapolis here, so I just wanted to go find the house, which I did. So I drove past. I didn't do anything, but it was just interesting to see the home in which Jared was under house arrest. But I digress. It was fun. It was fun for what it was, I thought. Yeah.
Yeah. I do think that Sammy made a great point, which is something that I wanted to mention earlier, which was this was the only time in the episode where they took Krasinski out of basically the straight man role, which was something I was really excited to see. I do think that was I was waiting all episode for that, which is are they going to make him do something other than play basically some offshoot of Jim? So that was really good. Rich, was there any other ones that you wanted to talk about?
Well, I mean, let's talk about the losers. Sammy brought it up. I thought that as pre-tapes go, that was great. I mean, I just thought, again, we kind of know where this is going. It's a little bit of a twist, but once sort of the game of the sketch is established that he's going to start, the reveals continued to just make us giggle and make us laugh. It didn't get to a point where it's okay, I get it, wrap it up. He was so earnest. It was lovely. I thought Andrew played it really nice in that, that didn't happen, or, oh, not exactly. I thought everybody in it was fun, worked really well, a nice little evergreen piece. I really agreed, also really strong.
Yeah, Sammy, James, either of you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, just kind of to echo what Rich said. Yeah, I mean, the escalation in the sketch really worked. It didn't go on for too long. I thought the timing was really good, and yeah, it's just a really good showcase for Dismukes, who for me is starting to become the featured cast member that I really have my eye on as someone who was added into this season, who I feel like has a ton of potential in the show. I hope, he, makes it to another season. Tim Robinson was someone who he reminds me of, just kind of some of the delivery and weird comedy that he has. And obviously he was only on the show for a season. So I'm hoping in the next couple of episodes we have for the rest of the season that we get more showcases of him, because I really like what he's been delivering so far.
Yeah. James?
Yeah, Andrew had this mute had a really good showing this episode. Like I said, it was really fun to see everybody, in there. Some folks, I wish we could have seen a little bit more of Heidi Garner and always Melissa. But and since we haven't mentioned the sketch yet, it was such the obvious 10-to-1 sketch. But the bedroom confession, I noticed, I saw somewhere people like just freaking out on the fact that he identifies his name as Ratatouille, which is not his name. But it's like, I think that is so intentional to basically just be two things. One, stupid about it, I think. And then two, just to hit you over the head with the fact that this is coming from that. But and then I don't even know what 80s piece in there had to do with anything, which is just another, because it's so late in the night, sometimes you wonder if there are just pages that had to be cut, or maybe that's just, what it was supposed to be. But it was just the the epitome, I guess, of just that late night sketch.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Does anyone want to talk about that, or should we move on to any other sketches you guys want to talk about?
I just want to yes and the idea. I don't think I love this sketch, but I was so happy to see we're back to the crazy 10-to-1. I defy you to see if you can guess how they came up with this sketch if drugs were not involved. Ratatouille is not timely. It has nothing to do with sex. But nothing about it makes sense. I cannot figure out how they got there, but I love that they did.
Yeah. Yeah,
that's one of those questions, when you watch a movie like Ratatouille, where you have the guy controlling his actions. Where late night in the writers' room, I can definitely see them being like, he's having the rat, cook for him. What else could the rat do? So I really enjoyed that sketch as well, and the button at the end with Pete Davidson as the critic just killed me. So. Overall, great episode for Pete as well. I want to shout that out.
Yeah, definitely. There was one sketch that I wanted to definitely talk about on the podcast with you guys, and that was this Blue Georgia sketch. And I know that I was looking at a lot of people's opinions online, and a lot of people had different opinions about this sketch and what the intentions of the sketch were. And I found this sketch really interesting because what I found is that they did something with this sketch that they haven't done for a while on the show, which is make subtle digs at the left. And that's we've known for the past few years, especially during the Trump administration, that the show's voice is probably like 95% Democratic. But the fact is that they took a very clever concept, in my opinion, which is the state of Georgia turning blue, and then made it like as blue as it possibly can be. And you walk in and you see the references to the Beyond Meat and people referring to themselves as he, him, and the Michelle Obama book. And I just thought that there was a lot of stuff that was very clever here. And it was to me, in terms of my overall thoughts of the show, I actually felt like it was a really strong way to start off the show. And the show for me died out a little bit towards the end, even though there were some things that I did like. But the Blue Georgia sketch I particularly liked, written by Michael Che, who doesn't always get that many lead sketches or lead writing credits on sketches in the show. And I thought it was interesting to see his voice on things right off the top. So Rich, what's your opinion on that Blue Georgia sketch?
Oh, John, you might want to go to someone else first. I don't know if you want to start with me.
All right.
I thought this was one of the low points of the show. I was very bored by this sketch. For me, it felt like I didn't know at the time who wrote it, but I knew it was not written by anyone from Georgia because there was no specificity of a point of view. I felt like, okay, we're going to map very traditional liberal stereotypes onto the state of Georgia. So that made me absolutely laugh for about 20 seconds, maybe 30 seconds. And then it was just like a list. From that point, I could have written the rest of the sketch. I should not be able to write Saturday Night Live sketches. I'm not a Saturday Night Live writer. So for me, I didn't really know what the point was. And I'm very open to taking shots at the left if they are of a specific point of view where I could go, you know what? I got to admit, you're right. You got me. And I didn't feel this was that. I felt this was just a mapping game that for me got old very quickly. But within it, very good performances. I like the actors in it. I just didn't know what it was really saying as, oh, look how blue it's gotten. They have avocado toast. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I don't know. I felt like I would love to see a writer from the South go, no, if we're going to make fun of this, this is what you make fun of. I didn't feel that. But if it worked for you, that's great.
Yeah. No, that's totally fair. Sammy, what did you think?
I overall enjoyed it. I do think it probably wasn't one of the highlights of the episode for me. Look, whenever you throw like a Jewish humor, like the Mazel Tov and the Jewish and their thing, that's always going to work for me as a Jew. But I mean, overall, I liked it. I do think, kind of like what Rich is saying, point of view wasn't necessarily there, but most of the humor worked for me. I do think some of the stuff throughout the episode with the direction and the camera work was off. And I kind of noticed that when the show came back at the beginning of this season, the first episode or two. So probably just coming back from the break, there were some technical issues, but yeah, so that impacted this sketch for me a little bit. But overall, it was a good sketch, but definitely not one of my favorites of the night.
Yeah. James, let me get your 2 cents on that. And with regards to technical stuff, Sammy, I definitely noticed that in the game night sketch that we got later on in the episode, that I felt that opinion that you had on the Blue Georgia affected my viewing of the game night sketch later on. James, so whatever you want to touch on, go ahead.
Yeah, I kind of enjoyed the Blue Georgia sketch. Rich, you are not wrong. And to a certain point, I think hadn't thought about it from maybe it could have cut the satire or whatever deeper had it been written by someone from Georgia who could speak to some more inside things. But as I heard you kind of saying what you had to say, it also then made me think, well, maybe part of the joke is that Georgia is now trying to catch up. You know what I mean? Like that it's just, it is so obvious that they are not there. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, but I enjoyed it for what it was in terms of it being sort of clever as a place to, we mentioned this, I think, on the front of this program here today. A lot of it is in the way that they presented some of the, more current events in a different setting.
Yeah, that's fair. All right, there's a couple other things before we kind of get into the cast a little bit more that I wanted to touch on. One was I don't have a lot to say about this supermarket sweep sketch that they did. A typical Kate and 80, which I love them, but I have seen this before, them like rolling around on the floor and having fun. But it was just actually, James, I'll go right back to you on this because we had both heard prior to the show that there was going to be a supermarket sweep sketch, and my first thought was, are we getting a Leslie Jones cameo? And I just thought it was, I know she's said some things that were not so great about the show since she's left the show, but I thought it was so weird to me. How do you not at least make a reference to the fact that, one of your, biggest cast members from the last few years that has left the show is now the current host of the game show that you are parodying? I thought it was just so bizarre to me.
Yeah, I think all of that seems strange in regard to that whole sketch. And in fact, I was, just so excited to see Kate and 80 reunited in this episode. And they have done some just really just crazy character work over the years. So I was looking forward to more, I think, from that sketch. And for me, it was a little bit of a letdown.
Rich, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, the premise of the sketch was because it's 90s bland television, we can't address that these two lesbians are actually romantic partners. But then the sketch kind of lost that thread and just became about watching these two great performers be great together. But I wasn't quite sure what to laugh at because the premise itself was so watered down and it didn't really follow it through to any conclusion. So and also, yeah, when I saw in the bumper, I saw Supermarket Sweep, like, oh, great, here's Leslie Jones, or someone, doing a Leslie Jones impression. I can't decide which I'm more excited about. And then kind of, not so great.
Yeah. Sammy?
Well, yeah, jumping on to what Rich said, I didn't even think about that, just having someone impersonating Leslie Jones, because definitely of the cast members who have left the show in recent years, she's someone that you could definitely, she has characteristics and her energy that you can definitely have, another cast member. I'd love to see what her Leslie Jones impression could be. So maybe that's a missed opportunity, but yeah, I mean, kind of like everybody's saying, it being a period piece, if you will, at all, not acknowledging Leslie Jones made sense to me. Towards the end of it, overall, I kind of agree with what people are saying here. Kate and 80 it was just good to have them back, and it was definitely like one of their weaker kind of pairings where they've done like similar, friend characters like this. Definitely, one of the weaker ones, but. I wasn't sure when we were coming back from the break if we were going to get Kate, because I know that she's going to be filming, I believe, the Tiger King show soon. So I was just, very grateful that we got some Kate and 80 before, the season was up.
Yeah, very, very timely, her going to do the Tiger King show now.
Right.
Is there? Go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to throw in. We've talked about some of the impressions with, especially with the theme songs. I don't think we've touched on what for me was hands down the best impression of the night, which was weirdly Bowen Yang as Fran Leibowitz. Okay, the fact that sentence just came out of my mouth is insane. Now, I don't know how popular Pretend is a City on Netflix was or wasn't. I don't know if it's a Coast thing, but me and my wife watched every episode. That impression of Bowen Yang was fantastic. I thought it was so fun. And B, if you haven't seen it, it's basically a 7-episode documentary where Martin Scorsese directs and interviews Fran Leibowitz just about life, and she's just as engaging. And a lot of it is the two of them on stage together. And halfway through, maybe the second or the third episode, when we watched it, I turned to my wife and I said, have you noticed how Martin Scorsese is laughing so hard at everything Fran Leibowitz says? And Jen's like, what? And it became our obsession. And then we started arguing in fun about whether he's unbelievably tickled by her or whether he was leaning into the laughter. And we really thought this is a joke that we were the only two people on the planet Earth that had. And so to see on Saturday Night Live, an impression of Martin Scorsese in this very niche thing was just so wonderful. I loved this. I thought this was really fun.
See, I thought your story was going to end with you ripping your eyebrows off.
And by the way, the Kyle Mooney Martin Scorsese impression was as bad of an impression as Bowen Yang's was good, and yet it was still just joyous and fun.
I am so happy you brought this up, Rich, because I wrote down in my notes that this might have been like the highlight of the entire episode for me. I am someone who I am vaguely aware of Fran Leibowitz. I've seen the Netflix thing like pop up on Netflix. So I've seen 5-10 seconds of her speaking. And the minute he, they were rolled into the update desk, I was dying. And that's when one of these impressions or weekend update spots really works, is that when you don't even need to have much investment in the person they're parodying, and it still works and the jokes still work. That's when you have a winner. I don't know if this is something he can bring back in the future, but I'd love for them to do it. The line that really got me was, be something useful, like a piece of melon wrapped in prosciutto. I died at that, is probably as hard as Kyle Mooney's Martin Scorsese did not rip off my eyebrows, but I love that. It was great.
Yeah. Was there anyone who wanted to touch on anything else from Update before we move on? Okay, so let's move on to the cast and talk a little bit about who stood out for each of you. So, James, I'll start with you. Was there a cast member who stood out to you this week that you want to talk about?
Stood out, I guess I would say, Beck Bennett just really seems to be the glue right now. I mean, maybe that's the obvious choice to mention Beck, but it just occurred to me, I mean, he plays so many different things. He does them all very, very well. Somebody, I can't remember where, had started to, everybody used to always call Phil Hartman the glue. But he also reminds me a little bit of, I was always a fan of Chris Parnell, who seemed to be able to take so many different roles, be the straight person and also be just a really crazy zany person as well. So I've really been enjoying Beck. What's interesting is the folks that we didn't see as much. I just look forward to kind of the next episodes that hopefully that, like I mentioned earlier, more Heidi, more Chris Redd, more Ego. Of the kind of first and second season folks, Chloe is a 10 in my book.
Yeah. Rich, what about you? Who stood out for you?
I mean, even though I didn't love the Blue Georgia sketch, absence makes the heart grow fonder. So to see 80 Bryant back, it just made me so happy. She can do anything. She's just so joyous and fun. And then you put her and Kate together. And even if I don't love the sketches, I just love seeing her back. So certainly there, Bowen Yang again, I think, I forget that he's a featured player. I mean, to me, Fran Leibowitz was the most memorable impression of the whole, of the whole episode. So it was great to see her. And I would agree, Chloe Feynman, I think, is also of the new team is very, very strong. But it was great to see 80 back. And I love having Cecily back, even though this wasn't her first episode back. Just a lot of her stuff was just really great.
Yeah, and Sammy, I'm going to come to you, but I I'm looking at everybody on the panel. I give them the list of sketches and the amount of sketches that every cast member is in, and it's very interesting for me to see that all of our main players, except for Melissa, Chris, and Heidi, Heidi we usually see more from. This isn't new for Chris or Melissa, but almost every cast member of our main cast was in at least 4 sketches this episode, which I think is really great in terms of them dividing the work among the entire cast. So Sammy, what about you? Anybody stood out for you?
Well, jumping off that point a little bit, yeah, when you sent over the notes, I totally noticed that as well. I was very surprised, even though I've gushed about him during the episode, about Dismukes also being in 4 sketches during the episode. So definitely a good standout episode for him. But I touched on this a little bit earlier, but Pete Davidson. Pete is someone who I know, people in the community don't think he works so well in sketches, or at least historically he hasn't. But I've been on in Pete's camp since day one, just because of his weekend update stuff. And just when he came on the show, he's a little older than me, but just seeing someone, around my age, like be on SNL was so cool. And just the way that he's grown over the last couple of years, and especially this season, I think he's really starting to hit his stride in the sketches. I mean, if you had asked me this time last year, it seemed like he was going to leave at the end of last season. But the fact that he's like really hitting his stride now, like I don't want him to leave after this season. So really liked everything that he brought to the table this episode.
Sammy, let me one up that. I think this is Pete's best season on the show so far. Do you agree?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. And it's funny because he's maybe been on update once, maybe twice. And, there are some seasons where, it felt like almost every week he was on update. So the fact that he is still kind of making that impact on me in the show by not being on update every week, I think is a testament to kind of how he's improved this season.
I feel like you're seeing him for the first time have the confidence to be in a sketch and not giggle and not just be himself or try to do something silly to get a laugh. And I love that, especially in the cold open. I mean, he played that gamer just right. And if he was kind of checked out and was kind of looking at the camera and laughing or looking down, and it wouldn't have been as fun as it was. I think he really is hitting the stride of like, he's all in now. He feels like he's all in on these sketches that he's in, even if they're not the best sketches. And I think he's doing a great job.
I agree. And we didn't touch on it yet, but for me, probably the best moment of the entire night is Pete Davidson and Machine Gun Kelly falling off the stage in the Goodnight.
Fantastic.
And Rich, let me go back to you because I know you love the Goodnights, and this
I love the Goodnights. I love the Goodnights. Well, first of all, if you think I knew who Machine Gun Kelly was before Saturday at 11 p.m., you're crazy. And of course, watching this guy and at the end seeing the huge bear hug between Pete Davidson and Machine Gun Kelly, I went, of course they are friends. Of course the two of them just felt like two, and I say this with love, jackasses on stage clowning around, horseplaying. This is exactly what you want from SNL. This is the party that I want to be at. These are the two dumb frat guys who had too much to drink and are now playing chicken on the stage and throwing themselves off. Glad no one got hurt. Super fun moment. Dumb, but I loved it. It's exactly what we want to see.
Well, I do want to touch on what Rich just said about Pete and Machine Gun Kelly is, right before the 10-1 sketch, my buddy texted me being like, big missed opportunity not having Machine Gun Kelly and Pete Davidson in a sketch together because they're such, good friends in real life. And we fell into a sketch, if you will, during the good night. It's a great moment that, even though we didn't get a sketch, well, we can hold on to that. We can cherish that.
Yeah, I was like, I have to get this GIF up on Twitter as quickly as possible, and it went semi-viral. It wasn't as viral as your stuff, Sammy, sometimes that you do, but it was pretty good.
I would say this about Machine Gun Kelly is again, it's another example of kind of a younger person who is so excited to be there, which, and I saw an earlier during the week social post about him, modifying his guitar, special guitar for the show. I mean, he was psyched to be there. I eventually did get to see the Good Nights. It was initially cut at my affiliate because the show was running long, which is always I never liked that. And the Cecily Tyson bumper was a good nod as well, obviously, as we just lost her this week, and first African American woman to host, I think in season 4, I think it was.
Yeah, definitely important to mention. As a little bit of on a different note, I'm not sure if you all saw this as well, but we had a very weird Wayne's World sketch in an Uber commercial also after the monologue. I don't know if any of you want to touch on that, but what happened to Mike Myers?
The only thing I'll say is that when that first it came on for me right after the monologue, and I thought it was a sketch, and I was very confused for the first 10 to 15 seconds. But man, I've been wanting an Austin Powers 4 for a while now, but I don't know, Mike.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Okay, so that's the Krasinski episode. Overall, I really felt that there was a lot of excitement going into the first episode of the year. For me, it was a good episode. It wasn't a great episode. We had some really interesting sketches, but my overall thought as I left the episode at 1:02 a.m. on Saturday night, going into Sunday morning, was just I wish I just saw Krasinski play more different types of characters. And that's really where I walked away, being very excited to see him host SNL, but I wish I could see more from him. And I hope one day that he does get to host again and we will see more from him then. Does anyone else want to touch on anything to do with last Saturday's episode?
Just for me, a reminder of, when we come back from a break, and this is probably the longest break, we've had in years coming out of Christmas, it's like a reset of the season premiere, which is, it's a warm-up show. It is dusting off the cobwebs. You add the logistics of COVID. So I agree. I thought it was a good show. Didn't think it was a great show. Fun to have them back. But I feel like, okay, now we're going. Let's go. Now let's get ramped up. Let's get to Dan Levy. Let's do this.
I think that this was the longest Christmas hiatus, save for maybe the writer's strike in 07, 08, with the exception of maybe in the early years when their Christmas show would have been earlier in December. But to count it from the holidays through January, this was a pretty long hiatus, and I'm with you, Rich. I think it was good with what they brought, and now they're, I think, going to just be on fire this next week and going for again 5 in a row is that hurts, I think.
The only thing I was going to add to what Rich was saying, how it's basically a reset and comparing it to the first episode of the season is, the first episode of the season had Chris Rock hosting, and I think this episode was better. I like this episode more than the first episode of the season. So I think as much as they're kind of dusting off the cobwebs a little bit, I think overall it was like a solid start to the season. If they keep this energy going through this next string of 4 episodes that we have in front of us, I think we're in for some really good shows.
Yeah, so let's it's a great segue. Let's turn to the Dan Levy show, and most famous for Schitt's Creek, which he wrote with his father, Eugene Levy, who was supposed to host the show in 1985 with John Candy. They were both going to host the show together, and there was a writer's strike at the time, and they didn't get a chance to host. And it'll be really interesting to see. We haven't had a lot of cameos this season, but do we get a Eugene Levy cameo? Rich, let me go to you. Let me hear your expectations for the Dan Levy hosted episode. Are you a Schitt's Creek guy?
Big Schitt's Creek fan, really liked it a lot. It was one of those, saw the first 1 or 2 episodes and I was like, I don't get what all the hubbub is about, but it was just such a joyous way to end each night when it was on Netflix of just this wonderful family. I feel like this is a victory lap for him more than anything else. Obviously I'm of the age I loved, his father. I loved, and yet coming in and liking the scenes with him and Anne Murphy more than one of the two most iconic comedians ever. So happy for that. How will he be playing different characters? I don't know. I heard there was a Christmas movie he was in. I heard he was very strong in. So I think it'll be fun. His dad, who I grew up loving, he is of an age that unless he got the COVID shot, I don't know if he should be doing cameos. I will say this cast, I think, is so close that it wouldn't surprise me if they tried to sort of break what would be prudent COVID behavior to maybe show up and show up in a cameo or something. So I think it'll be fun.
Yeah, James, let me hear from you. What are your expectations for the Dan Levy episode?
I'm really excited for it. And Rich, I can't think of the Christmas movie, but I saw it and he was great in it. I can't think of what it was called, but yeah, just this past season. I don't anticipate any cameos. More maybe COVID, but more so that I think that his father and others are probably going to let Dan have his moment. You know what I mean? A little bit.
Yep.
But who the heck knows? Dan's a great writer too, so I'm looking forward to just seeing some, maybe quirky outside the box kind of things. That being said, that's where my head is.
Yeah, Sammy, I know you mentioned to me off air that you haven't gotten to Schitt's Creek yet, but are you binging it before next weekend?
Oh, well, not sure if there's enough time for that. I'll try, but no, I watched the first season and a half of Schitt's Creek, and then for whatever reason fell off of it. Definitely want to get back into it. I liked what I saw, but the movie was Happiest Season was the Christmas movie that he was in, and he was great in that. So I'm really excited to see what he is going to bring to the show. I know that after the Emmys last season on the SNL communities and subreddits, a lot of people were predicting. It seems like a lot of the times after the Emmys, whoever makes a splash comes to host. Phoebe Waller-Bridge comes to mind. So I'm definitely excited that he's getting his chance to do it. As far as Eugene Levy, just echoing what everyone else says, probably not for the COVID of it all. Maybe they can do some sort of pre-tape that they put him into. But what I want to see, what I just thought of, is Dan Levy doing a Eugene Levy impression. That is what I need to see in this episode, because I don't think I've ever seen him in any interviews or anything like that, do an impression of his dad, and I'm sure he's got one cooking. So Dan Levy, if you're watching this, do it. Pitch it.
That's a good call, Sammy. That's a good one.
Yeah, that's great. And I failed to mention it, but also obviously Catherine O'Hara has a very rich history with SNL as well. Was hired as a cast member and then never became a cast member. So that was a real
Chloe Donahue.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Which was a really interesting statistical nugget from the history of the show, and she did actually come back and host a couple times previously. So so that is nice. With regards to the SNL Stats coverage for next week, we are going to be doing 2 shows next week. We are going to be live immediately after the Dan Levy show. So come join us on our SNL Stats YouTube page. I'll be there with a couple of special guests, and we'll be breaking down the episode right after, staying up late and talking about our immediate thoughts and hot takes about the episode. And then, of course, we will have our regular roundtable with an incredible panel a few days later. So let's go around the table. Let's talk about plugs. So, Rich, where can people find you? And do you have anything that you want the listeners to know about?
At Rich Tack on Twitter. Not that I'm super active there, but doing some live storytelling. I've got a show the first Monday in March. It's on Zoom, so live is a relative term, but we'll be telling a fun story from an inadvertent acting experience that I did not mean to have, and so that'll be fun. So, but yeah, find me there, and on Facebook. Always feel free to say hello.
Yeah, and superfan Sammy, where can people find you?
As you can see, you can follow me everywhere at that Sammy Kay. I'm mostly on Twitter these days, so you should definitely give me a follow there if you want to, hear my dumb jokes and, or I guess read my dumb jokes and my hot takes on what's going on in this crazy world of ours. And I look forward to being on this program again soon.
Yeah, and Sammy, for those who only check out our regular shows and haven't checked out any off-week stuff, can you give the listeners a little bit of a pitch about why they should watch your superfan hosted takeovers?
Absolutely. Well, if you want more of this guy, and I'm the host of that show. It's not our fearless leader here, John. But me and the super fans, we put together a fun show. It's usually one main topic, a discussion. So the last episode we did was SNL Time Machine, where we kind of went back in time and explored alternative histories. If you were to change something from the show's past, what would the show look like today? And that conversation was really fun. So I definitely, recommend you guys check that one out as well as the previous episode we did. And there will be more to come in the future. So definitely check it out.
Yeah, and
I gotta say, the trivia at the last half of that last episode was a lot of fun. My wife and I played along.
Okay, and James, thank you so much for joining us on one of these regular panels. It's always such a pleasure to hear from you. I know that you are not too active on social media yourself, but is there anywhere where you can connect with people or anything that you want to plug for the audience?
Not to plug, certainly on Facebook and on Instagram, JP Stevens Jr. on Instagram. But again, not super active. Hopefully the next time, whenever that might be on SNL Stats, we can talk some more. But again, it's been a pleasure.
Very happy to have you, and it has been a pleasure to talk to all of you tonight about the first episode of 2021. For you to catch all of our shows, please follow us on Twitter or Instagram at SNL Stats, and subscribe to us in any podcatcher or on YouTube. Those YouTube subscriptions really help with people finding the show. So if you are a regular listener and you haven't subscribed on YouTube, please go ahead and do that. I just want to thank once again all of our listeners for joining us in 2021. Like I said, a lot to look forward to. We're really excited about the show coming back and for another 4 episodes before we take a break. So a lot of SNL to cover over the next month, and we will be here alongside you going through it all with our incredible panels that we have moving forward. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. We will see you next week. Have a good night.
But we're here for the numbers as well. So let's get statistical, so unpredictable here on SNL.